The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Quirky Dog Podcast, inspired by some of the quirkiest dogs you can ever imagine and the owners who love them. This podcast is brought to you by the quirky couple themselves, Scott and Jess Williams. Their aim is to educate and entertain. Here's Scott and Jess.
Welcome, guys, and happy Wednesday. Scott's lighting them up because we just had the New England Cigar Expo this past weekend. It was so great. We had such a great time.
Yeah, I thought about going to a rehab after that, but
cigar rehab.
Instead, I decided to light another one. Scott's
got his special mug today for his coffee and everything else, and we even have the New England Cigar Expo pig on today. We're going to see if that one can make noise. And we're going to do a pretty serious episode today talking about disaster preparedness, specifically highlighting everything going on with Hurricane Helene and dealing with all of that, because a lot of these hurricanes affect the dogs greatly, and our country is in complete chaos right now, especially in the southeast, what's going on. So we're going to touch on that, but first we're going to start with the quirky tip of the day. Let's see if this one can squeak. Oh my gosh, it's a miracle.
Oh, it's a golden pig.
Chrissy's got the pig, but we tried. This one's a little piggy bank. Okay, my quirky tip is, it is tick season. It's kicking up again here. I really like the product Cedar Side. You take it, you sprinkle it in the yard. Really good product. You don't need a ton of it, but we do, I put like whole bags out in our yard, but you can just sprinkle it throughout the yard, and it's a really, really good product. It is pet safe. A lot of people are so about Cedar, but we've had good success with it over the years, so check it out if you have not already used it. Cedar Side, worth every penny. Okay, so disaster preparedness. We did do a episode kind of about fires a while back. There was a very highly profile, sports couple that house caught on fire, and we kind of talked about what to do in a disaster like that. But these natural disasters, more specifically the hurricanes, we want to start talking about ways you can prepare. This is less about how we can help right now. Of course, there's a lot of funds and everything that we can help for disaster relief funds right at this moment. But these hurricane towns, Asheville isn't typically one of them. This one is more inland than most. They're getting hit pretty regularly. So obviously these people are getting more used to dealing with them. But if you have dogs specifically, there's different measures that you want to take to prepare, to keep the dogs calm, and to keep everyone hopefully as well and as safe as possible. So that's today's agenda.
Well, I choose not to live in the
It's not living in fear. We're just preparing.
No, not fear. Just certain parts of the country are prone to
and even
a lot of disasters.
Like everything is different right now with global warming and crazy stuff happening everywhere. And I legit thought about that. Like, wow, this one's pretty inland. Normally things aren't so far north. Like Maine is pretty safe, but we live within 15 minutes of the coast. Like, what would we do if we were going to be getting flooded or stuck or something else? And my best option was to get in the car and drive to Noel's with all the dogs. That was the only option I had.
Up into the White Mountains, New Hampshire.
Well, no, but really, just go far west. Where can we take everybody and the pet dogs? Okay, so some things.
It helps to have a vehicle that holds all of your dogs.
Yeah, if we couldn't rent one, we'd have to be towing a trailer behind. Regardless, this isn't about our disaster plan, but an evacuation plan should definitely be in order. If you are the type of person that you're concerned your property is consistently getting hit, where would you go? How would you go? And can you take your animals with you? That's first and foremost. Another thing you want to think about is having these emergency kits, right? We have something for the dogs. There's a lot of poor access to clean water, to accessible roads. Obviously, cell phone service is down right now. So what does that look like as far as preparing things for the dog? You want to have at least 5 to 7 days worth of food packed up. If you're someone that feeds raw food, electricity is likely going to be out. Refrigeration isn't going to be there. You might want to look into an option like the Honest Kitchen. When you think about the Honest Kitchen, now we're adding fresh water to that. So maybe you get your dog conditioned to some canned food. You have a system where you have food for your dog, and it's going to be okay if the dog is raw fed, that they can transition and that they're going to be able to eat, and that there isn't going to be an issue with this. So this should definitely be in your kit, in an emergency plan, and something that you have ahead of time. You have stowed away, especially as hurricane season approaches. You're ready. You have stuff in a bag. That would be our number one thing. Definitely food for 5 to 7 days.
Yeah, and it's nice. A lot of people have them already, these plastic containers with the screw tops to keep their kibble in. And it keeps rodents out of it. It keeps the food fresh. And
water out, moisture out.
It keeps water out. So, we have human-grade 5-gallon buckets with screw tops that I was using for my weed last year. But the preppers, it used to be that preppers were considered a little bit fanatical, thinking about the end of the world and Civil War and all this stuff. But now, with so much going on, the preppers are like mainstream. Yeah, there's so many products now to prepare and for animals as well. You got to have the food for. I'm not sure what the right length of time would be. I think a week is probably a minimum. Most of us have a bag of food lasts dogs a month. So It's not easy. It's not hard to put together enough food for your dog. It's the water is the heavy thing to be moving around.
Yeah, and you want to have that. You need enough clean water for you and for your dog and everything else. Another thing to be considering is medical records, you guys. If for some reason you do have to evacuate or you see another vet that isn't, your standard vet for some reason, a few days, a few weeks down the road, you want to have a rabies certificate. You want to have your dog's medical records on file, a rabies certificate more than anything else, but just something that they can quickly reference, like, this is my animal, I own this animal, the animal is vaccinated against rabies, we're good to go, now we can treat the animal as we need to. So whatever files that you have on your dogs, copies of those that are laminated or something else, just having a set of those in your to-go emergency kit bag, not a bad idea whatsoever. Go ahead.
I was going to say, we got those tubes a couple of years ago. They're PVC tubes with the caps that you keep all of your dog's paperwork in. And that's nice to have with the crate, with the dog. And apparently there's a good possibility, thank God I've never been in a situation like what's going on in Florida. And I was in a big earthquake, but it still was not nearly, it didn't cause the kind of devastation that this hurricane did. But having to separate from your animals is a kind of, I guess it's a realistic thing where you have to drop your dogs off at a rescue or some type of a kennel, but you become separated through necessity. You just cannot have these animals with you when you're being evacuated or something. So you want to, if you're going to have to leave them temporarily in the situation, you want to make sure that they have all these records, identification, and one thing I saw was that you should have a photo of yourself with that particular dog in with their stuff so that you can make sure you can get them on the other end.
Yeah. You want to make sure that people know that dog is yours. And photos of the dog is a big one, you guys. If for some reason something happens, the dog does get out of your care, the dog does get out of your possession, the dog's lost, whatever you want to say, you want to be able to say, like, this is my dog, this is what it looks like, and very specific. There's a lot of animals that are lost during this time. Identification is a huge one. If you do not have a collar, I even like the collars that have like the number and stuff engraved on them or, embedded into them, embroidered into them, rather than just tags hanging. Microchips, huge thing. This is a national way that anyone can find your dog. Scan it wherever the dog ends up, whatever's happening, identification that leads back to you. So the collar, yes, something that can be waterproof, something that people can read, an easy phone number to reach you when cell service gets back up. And then, of course, the microchip. If you have not already microchipped your dog, we highly, highly recommend it. It's an easy process. It's a pretty affordable thing.
And we have a lot of clients now. This is getting pretty common. Dogs are coming in with Apple tags on their collars. So if everyone loses cell service temporarily, that's not going to be of any value. But if that dog is next to somebody else that has an iPhone, and you're going to be able to track that on your phone from anywhere in the country.
Yeah.
You'll be able to see where your dog is at any given time.
Yeah, and when we were coming up with this, we were doing some research, and Scott, when he mentions being, separated from your dog, this is a real thing. In Katrina alone, they estimate like 100 to a 250,000 dogs were left behind or stranded or passed away. And some people estimate it was closer to 500,000. Like, that is a ton of dogs. And since then, there's been more plans that have been put into action. There's been legal legislation that's been pushed through. You're not able to leave your dog, really. You're supposed to legally take your dog with you. But this all comes with preparing and making sure that you can be safe and also help get your dog to safety. So these are real things to consider. And the world is changing. Like, this kind of crap is happening more and more often. These natural disasters are popping up. A lot of crazy stuff is going on more and more regularly. And it is really important to be prepared and have a plan on the front end. Anything else I'm missing here before we go to break?
No, I think it's a very uplifting topic.
Okay, let's go to break super quick. And when we get back, we'll talk more about how to prepare for a disaster.
Want to keep up with all the latest from the Quirky Dog podcast like me and Murphy here? Then make sure you head on over to the YouTube channel and subscribe. Or if you prefer to listen to the madness, go on over to iTunes or Spotify and follow the Quirky Dog podcast. And hey, while you're there, leave a rating and review and let them know what you think of the show. Until then, keep it quirky.
Okay, we're back. So another thing is if for some reason you have to leave and you have to leave your animal with someone else, a caretaker, whether that's a local caretaker or the dog's going to be, across the state or whatever else, like you have that planned originally, like you have that set up beforehand. Conditioning your dog to a crate. I cannot stress it enough. If there is crazy shit happening outside your house and your dog is stressed, there's nothing better than being able to say like, hey, go get in your crate. Everything's going to be okay. The dog feels safe there. You're traveling. The dog is in a crate. For some reason, there's these like big shelters that you have to go to. The dog is used to being crated. If you have to go to a pet-friendly hotel for some reason, the dog can be crated. You can leave the room. They're not going to destroy the room, all of this stuff. A crate is always understated and it always has value, especially in a situation like this. So when you're thinking about a caretaker, when you're thinking about evacuating, when you're thinking about traveling, crate. And the more the dog is fearful and concerned and feeling like the energy of the whole situation and the fear of the whole situation and just wants to go, the more of a flight risk they are. So crating a dog in a vehicle could be more important than ever before because they're just acting differently because they realize that the world is out of whack. Like this isn't how things normally are. The barometric pressure's off. There's friggin' water pounding everywhere. There's flooding. The streets, you can't see them. It's stressful. So be conscious of that for the dog's sake, especially.
Yeah, and what I've seen, one of the biggest problems with these type of hurricanes, because the weather service is so good now with the different Doppler radars and the 7 different ways of predicting what's going to happen, is that people just don't believe it or they're just going to ride it out. They have plenty of time or a reasonable amount of time to actually move and get out of there or get their pets off somewhere else. But not everyone, but many people just want to ride it out because they've been through many storms in the past, and this is just another one, and we're going to just tough it out. And then it turns out to be, this monstrous thing that is
and times are changing.
Everybody.
It's just getting more and more intense, and the frequency and everything else. And like I said, typically we have family in Florida, we have friends in Florida, we have employees with family in Florida. Like we understand that like that's a typical situation, but this Asheville thing hit everybody out of the blue. Like North Carolina being hit so hard and, surrounding areas, Tennessee and stuff is not normal for this country. And they weren't as prepared. We had a lady drop off her dog for boarding this weekend and her son lives in Asheville. She couldn't talk to him for days. She was freaking out. And luckily they were able to make contact and everything. But, you just have to be conscious that these things we're kind of all becoming more and more vulnerable, and there could be exposure to these types of things even when we're not used to it in a certain situation. So getting on the front end of it and being as prepared as possible is super important. One thing I would consider, and it sounds a little bit extreme, but I would have a life jacket for your dog. If things get really hairy and there's a lot of flooding and everything else, maybe you can walk through some water, but especially if you have a small dog, you're not going to be able to carry your dog and your dog's going to get tired. So that's something to consider on the very, very off chance that things get that intense. Having a life jacket around is a good thing to have, even if your dog's never swam before, just for a little extra support so there's less fatigue.
Yeah, a small dog, all they need is 18 inches of water, and then that's
it. They can't walk
swim.
in it. And if you're not going to be able to carry, even a small dog, could still be 20 pounds. It's a whole other thing to consider. It's a lot of...
And if you're an older person, you're not going to have the strength to be trudging through water, carrying your personal belongings that are so important, and your dog and all this crap,
Yeah. Another thing, I didn't really consider this as so much. I'm not crazy about lepto vaccines and everything else, but with all the water that's accumulating after a hurricane, the chance of lepto is so much more prevalent. So make sure that your dogs are vaccinated against lepto in situations like that. Just so, if all of a sudden there's this big spread of lepto because the hurricane swept through and everything's changed in that climate, your dog's protected because you're not normally in an area that's so filled with moisture, but that has changed. So that was an interesting one that I saw that I wanted to mention. Who do you reach out to? Who can help you? All of this is obviously the question that we're all asking in the country, like, who can help? As far as the dog situation goes, you can call your local animal control officer. You can call your shelter. A really good idea is to get one of those stickers that like goes on your house. If for some reason, you have left or you had to be evacuated or something else, like people know, like there's X amount of dogs here, there's a cat here, there's a bird here, like please rescue my animals. You're putting that on your house so people are aware. There is a FEMA app. I don't think that works very well when you don't have cell phone service, but there is a way that, you can reach out and get the latest up-to-date information and all of that. So that's something, but you need to have a network in place before these things hit where like, okay, if I do need to reach out, if I do need more information, who do I go to? Who can help me? Where do I find the resources? XYZ. Because it's very stressful for humans to go through all of this, but it's also very stressful for the dogs. And it can be days and days and days that you're cooped up in the house and you're not going to be going outside, which brings up the point of pottying. So most dogs don't use litter boxes. I get it. A lot of dogs do not use pee pads. We're not big proponents of pee pads on this podcast. If there is a hurricane, going outside to potty in those winds or with that moisture or anything else is typically not an option. So it is good in that type of context to have some sort of situation where like you have a small bathroom, you put some pee pads down, you have a potty on command, thing that you can tell your dogs just so your dogs can relieve themselves. Because if they're holding it for 24 or 30 hours, that's a whole other situation that you're going to be entering. And that is like some real-time stuff. We've had friends with family and friends themselves who have had dogs that have gone through hurricanes, and that becomes a real pressing problem right away. So be conscious of that. And if you do have a small dog, and if your cat does use a litter box, you can get them to go in the litter box sometime and condition them to that. That is okay. That is something that in these emergency situations can really help you and can really save you. Really, really important thing to consider. Another thing is the sound. It can be very stressful. We think hurricanes are a ton of water, a ton of wind, all of this other stuff. Just the sound alone can really get the dogs going. So a little bit of cotton in the ears, not a bad idea, just to help the dogs feel safer, feel less effects of that. And obviously dogs' hearing is a lot more acute than ours, so it's going to be affecting them a lot more so. So having some cotton around, being able to stuff that in the ears, super, super, super important.
And meds work well too.
Yeah, if you have meds and your dogs
that have a lot of anxiety and a lot of problems with thunderstorms and all that kind of stuff, and you have meds for that type of stuff, then that'd be the time to do it.
Lean into what works. And I guess the most important point of all of this, and anyone out there that's going through this type of thing right now, is the more you're able to keep yourself under wraps and keep yourself under control, the better your dog is going to be. And I understand that is super stressful in a situation that you can't reach friends or you can't reach family and the conditions are life-threatening, and this isn't just an easy go like, oh, just suck it up and put a smile on your face. But if you have a practice like, doing some deep breathing or something that can calm you down, that is in turn going to help your dog. If you have something like a thunder shirt for your dog that you think your dog likes, use that. Lean into that in those types of situations, like Scott's talking about with the pharmaceuticals. If those work, if you have some CBD that works, lean into those type of things in these situations and try to do it preventatively. Try to be on the front end of it where, the dog hasn't gone full-blown freak out anxiety mode and you're trying to ease everything up. But the more you keep yourself at bay and you keep control of yourself and you're kind of just laying the foundation of everything's going to be okay, we can make it through this, it's not going to be a big deal, the more your dog is going to respond to that. So it's really, really important to check in with yourself and make sure that you are on your best behavior of keeping your wits about you and keeping your nerves under control. And I think that is going to impact the dogs most effectively and help for their most improved wellness as possible in this situation.
Yeah, I remember what was the hurricane down in New Orleans?
Katrina.
I remember on the news videos of a dog on somebody's roof.
Yeah.
The water was right up to the edge of the roof, and the dog swam and just climbed up on the roof and was just hanging out on the roof.
Yeah, and we learned a lot from that hurricane. That was obviously huge devastation, but they keep popping up. They keep coming, and if you do live in hurricane areas and everything else, and if you've been surprised by what's happened in Asheville and you're not typically used to dealing with this kind of thing in North Carolina, then now is the time to be grateful that we got through the first one and then come up with a plan. And if your plan is to stay and everything else, we respect that, we get that, but you need to have ways to prepare and ways to keep everybody calm, cool, and collected. I think that is the number one thing. Anything else I missed?
Well, it was an extreme hurricane, and I like to think that we're not going to be seeing anything like that for quite a while.
No, but they're still going through the thick and thin of it with Hurricane Helene right now, where you guys are in it, and 2 million people still don't have power, and a lot of people don't have cell phone service. Like, it is a thing right here, right now. And for any of you experiencing that, and with family and friends there, we are thinking of you. All the dogs down there, all the listeners and viewers down there, we are thinking of you. We are with you, and we hope that this all passes quickly, And this is a small memory sooner rather than later. But the way that things are progressing in this nation right now, we need to all be on top of what could happen with natural disasters. What were you going to say, Smitty?
It's not a small thing, and it's going to be in people's minds for years to come, this one. There's hundreds of people dead and missing.
No, I know. It's crazy.
So it's been a crazy, crazy hurricane.
Yeah. All right. So on that note, thank you so much for joining us this week. If you missed last week's episode, we had one of our live audience, or one of our live guests on with her dog. It was a great episode. You don't want to miss it. From chaos to kid-friendly with Kiva. We will see you next week. And in the meantime, Chrissy, I need you again because we're going to pretend like he can do it. In the meantime, keep it quirky. Bye, guys.
Take it easy, guys.
Take care.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.